How is what you just witnessed possible? A 400-pound steel machine smoothly floating from dirt mound to dirt mound and soaring 30 feet high, descending to solid, hard ground smoothly while transferring nothing only but a small jolt to its rider. Massive leaps like these are made possible through the employment of one remarkable piece of equipment, hydraulic damper shocks. My name is Ross Ilstrup, and for my senior project, I learned how to repair, rebuild, and service hydraulic damper shocks used on ATVs and snowmobiles. During the winter, snowmobiles are a big part of my life, and I spend many hours working on them in the garage and riding and racing them with my dad and family. A major mechanical component of snowmobiles is their suspension system, which is critical to a rider's safety and a racer's performance and success. The main component of the suspension system in a snowmobile is the hydraulic damper shock. And because it is so critical to a rider's safety and the performance of the snowmobile, it receives a lot of care and attention within the snowmobile community and industry. And because they're so interested to a racer's success, and I race snowmobiles, I was very interested in learning how to work on them and how they work and how they function. Here's just a visual, so you can this is the shock. It's this piece here. That's what just to help you visualize what they look like on a snowmobile or a four-wheeler, and they're also in the back. Jim Jaworski is a trusted, longtime family friend of my dad's and has a thorough understanding of how hydraulic damper shocks work. He also possesses an extensive knowledge of off-road suspension technology and is the owner of Motowaz Performance Systems, which is a company that designs, manufactures, and tests ATV suspension components, mainly hydraulic damper shocks. Excuse me. Jim has over 12 years worth of experience working on and testing ATV shocks. Jim explained the basic concepts with which the shocks I would be working on with worked and provided the proper working environment to successfully complete my project, as well as the tools. He also showed me the proper and procedures that are to be done when servicing and repairing, rebuilding shocks. For my research paper, I made an argument that biofuels should not replace conventional fuels in the world today because they destroy the environment, they negatively affect food supply worldwide, and they reduce engine function. My senior project and my senior paper are connected through fuel, obviously because ATVs run on fuel, and my paper focused around different types of sources of fuel, such as biofuel, in comparison to traditional fuel. I learned throughout my research paper that the production of most biofuels in the world today has many hidden detrimental side effects that aren't normally easy to see when you think about sustainable fuel production, but once you look into it more, it becomes apparent that there is many things that affect the earth negatively, although they are a naturally sustained fuel. I learned how to repair, rebuild, and service hydraulic damper shocks through engaging in a series of one-on-one training sessions with my mentor. Before I could begin, I needed to contact Jim, though. I spoke on the phone with him many times throughout the months of May and June, just trying to line up our meetings and plan which days would be the most would work the best for us. As Jim is very busy and has an unpredictable schedule, it was impossible to plan all our sessions in advance like I had previously intended to. So me and Jim determined the best thing to do was to schedule the dates about 1 week apart in advance. There's his shop and the area where I learned how to rebuild, repair, and service the shocks. The actual learning phase of my project began on June 18th when I met with Jim for our first session. It began with Jim explaining how hydraulic damper shocks work and identifying the major components of the shock in relation to the overall performance of the shock system. At the end of the lesson, we discussed and agreed upon what we would focus on in the next meeting and where to go from there, which we did which we repeated to do at the end of all the following sessions. Throughout the following lessons, I learned how to properly and safely disassemble the shocks, and I learned what the most common causes are of the mechanical failure and damage to the shocks. I learned how to replace worn out parts that were responsible for failures in the shocks. I learned these things by closely observing Jim working on his own customer shocks and also performing my own hands-on repairs to the shocks. After all my sessions were finished, I spent a total of 17 hours in the shop with Jim. There's some more pictures. If I could do this project again, I would probably have made it a greater priority to get better documentation of myself working on the shocks and redirected the focus of my photos to be more on me actually performing the maintenance on there, just to gather more evidence that I was there and less of Jim performing the work on the shocks. And I also wouldn't have allowed a month to pass between the last two sessions I had with my advisor, because it made the last part of the learning process a little more difficult, as I had to go back and sort of refresh my memory the last time between the month that I did not see him at all. But overall, my project went very smoothly and had almost no issues. I came to see that time is an extremely precious and critical resource in the business world as well as the adult workplace, and that when someone gives you their time for your own benefit, you should be respectful and mindful of it. I also learned how to schedule dates and times for appointments while taking into consideration my personal schedule and my advisor's schedule and our availability. I taught myself methods to ensure that I would make the self-scheduled appointments on time and accounting for unexpected circumstances such as traffic or problems getting there, direction issues. Excuse me. I also learned that although all ATV and snowmobile shocks operate according to the same general concept, there are different brands that make different shocks, and each of these different brands of shocks, although they function according to the same basic principles, it requires different tools to perform maintenance and rebuild and repair them because they use slightly different parts and some extra parts that others don't use. So you can't necessarily go from one shop learning how to work on one brand and completely transfer that information that you learned in those processes over to the next one, because there may be parts in there that were in the shock you previously learned on. I satisfied the academic criteria by learning the skills of repairing, rebuilding, and servicing high-performance ATV and snowmobile shocks. I met the personal growth criteria by facing the challenges of developing an understanding of how ATV shocks function and how to properly and safely work on them, including disassembling and reassembling them. I will use these skills in the future in the business world and through college applications and college meetings, because the organizational skills and methods I developed and used to hold myself accountable for making and keeping appointments will help me a lot for making appointments for such as job interviews or things of that nature. And I also now possess the necessary qualifications to be considered for employment at Motowa's Performance Systems, since I now know most of the procedures, the safe procedures and the proper ways to repair and rebuild the shocks. Additionally, the mechanical skills pertaining to the shocks can be applied to my personal life in that when I'm working on or calibrating my snowmobile suspension or family's snowmobile suspension, I'll have a better grasp on what I'm doing and a deeper knowledge of how the suspension works. In the same way that hydraulic damper shocks enable ATVs and snowmobiles to withstand impacts and overcome obstacles they may encounter throughout their rides, learning new skills and personal lessons enable individuals to overcome difficulties or overcome obstacles and push through difficulties that they encounter throughout their lives. Without the powerful technology of hydraulic damper shocks, breathtaking gravity-defying leaps like the ones you saw at the beginning of this presentation would not be possible. The skills I developed and the knowledge I acquired throughout my project has greatly increased my level of confidence in my own mechanical abilities regarding ATV and snowmobile shock suspension and calibration. Thank you.
Are the shocks on these, are they similar to like drivable shocks?
They're similar, I believe. They're like, once again, the basic concepts. I mean, it also depends on, I think, the age of the vehicle and the year. I'm sure the newer ones are much more similar to these, and older ones are probably a little different because they've changed over the years as they develop them.
Is this something you could kind of use on like fixing your own car if you had to put it in
Yeah,
shocks or
if it.
something?
I could possibly. I'd have to do a little more research maybe and go in a little more depth, but I'd still have I know the general concept, and that's what makes it important when working on them. If you need to understand how it works, you can't just know what goes together and what comes apart. You need to understand why they work the way they do, and because it could also cause serious failure, and that could be a really big deal for.
So you learn skills that not just specifically do this particular kind of shock, but to translate it into problem solving and troubleshooting in other areas of mechanics and cars.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or motorcycles or.
Yeah.
So you talked about riding snowmobiles. You don't fly through the air on the ATVs?
No, I don't do that. I don't get quite that much air when I race, but a little bit where it matters.
As a mom, that just scared me.
I have that one term for that, crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, I shuddered when you had that opening. Just going back all confident, woo! You know, I'm just right. Oof. Very good.
Any other questions for Ross?
No, that was very good.
Okay, good job,
Thank you.
Ross.